This particular man is going to serve 12 weeks in prison for replying filthy bastards on a post. Now, I don't think you should be jailed for 12 weeks for replying that. But this is the actual story. This is from Mario Nafal. I don't know how this guy posts this much, but he's a fire hose of content. 31-year-old Billy Thompson was sent to prison for 12 weeks after he replied filthy bastards on a post about police issuing a dispersal order to try and prevent protesters from becoming violent. It also included emojis of an ethnic minority person and a gun. His lawyer and Billy made the comment as part of a online Facebook conversation with a family member. The idea that this carries 12 months, I don't want to live in a country where that's the case. I just don't. I mean, the idea that my phone, because we know in Australia, and here's a wake-up call for you guys, because this is the censorship Olympics between Australia and the UK. In Australia, the intelligence agencies and police can edit your social media. They can post on your behalf. There is legislation that we have that can do that. The idea that I could be thrown in prison for something that I didn't even write. What happened to the idea that there's, reasonable doubt?
Well, I mean, part of the problem is that we've got a bunch of technocrats who think it's possible to rid society of the emotion of hate, which itself is a utopian dream. But as long as they think they can do that, they will coerce and coerce and coerce until they do it, and they never will, and so the coercion will only get more powerful, and this is an example of that. The problem when you allow the government to determine misinformation and hate speech, I mean, there are many problems with it, but one of them is it's always ideologically inconsistent. So, for example, you've got people going to prison in the UK for saying things that are deemed hate speech. But when was the last time you heard about a Muslim imam going to prison for calling Jews descendants from monkeys and pigs, or for glorifying terrorists? You just don't hear it happen. But it's always directed to the right. The right is always guilty of misinformation. So Islamic extremism, fine, that's okay, we'll turn a blind eye. Oh, right-wing nationalism, criticism of immigration policy, hate speech, misinformation. Same in Australia. You had people getting away with teaching children to chant intifada, intifada, intifada on the Sydney University grounds. Now, everyone knows that intifada means violence. And the best way to show that is to ask them, what if I got a whole bunch of kids together and said, this is what the Muslims historically have done to the Christians. Isn't that terrible? It's genocide and everything. And then I start getting them to chant crusade, crusade, crusade. No one would be under any illusions that that was about violence. But it's always the left that gets a free hand at these things. And that's why it's dangerous to give the power to government to do this.
Where did these terms of far right come from? Because they never used to exist. I actually think you're saying the technocrats are trying to get rid of hate speech. I actually think they're trying to control the populace is what they're doing. I don't know how else to look at it, because I am from a communist country, from the former USSR, and that's exactly what they used to do. You had no free speech. You said one thing against Stalin and you were in a gulag, and you were dead, or you were never heard from. So I don't know where this is heading. It's quite crazy. But where did this far right come from? We never had this before, other than fascism, sure, but if you have freedom of speech in your mind, all of a sudden you're a far right extremist.
Well, someone from the far right, if you look at when they say far right-wing extremist, if you look at people who are right-wing, they're just a normal person from 30 years ago.
Yeah, Julian's far right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Julian's so far right. Don't even get me started. Julian's a family man. He's in the Sono. He wants lower taxes. That's far right. Immediately.
I got called a fascist when I was campaigning, and I had to look at the person and say, "I'm Jewish. You're calling a Jewish person a fascist. Like, think about what you're saying."
Yeah. Well, Stephen Bartlett calls things like this semantic satiation, which is just like people getting so used to hearing the same term that it loses its meaning, right? And he's using it in different contexts, obviously, but that's really what it is. You can say misinformation so many times, it literally loses its meaning, and now you can call anything misinformation. Same thing with fascism. You can, go and look at what real fascism is, and I can tell you it's not somebody who just wants to be left alone and wants the government not involved in, their day-to-day life and, what they post on social media. Now, I'm not saying post and say specifically you want violence or whatever, but what I'm saying is like, really, is this where we are now? 12 weeks or 12 months? What was it?
12 weeks.
12
yeah.
weeks jail
Jail.
for posting something on Twitter or wherever he posted it.
Yeah.
And Stephen, intifada, I actually beg to differ. A lot of people don't know what that means. I've spoken to students in universities; they have no idea. It's tragic that our education system is so inferior that these kids have no idea what they're chanting.
Don't know English, let alone Arabic.
Oh, well, no, they don't know any English either, as per the NAPLAN results, which we'll get to.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. But no, my favorite example of calling someone a Nazi is probably Winston Churchill. Literally was like the guy against them. But anyway, moving on closer to home, guys, and you can't accuse me of focusing on overseas